For me, I think of myself as a culinary artist, and with my chefing, it's all about as much about beauty, and beauty being its own form of food and medicine, nourishment, just as much as
you
the
eat with your eyes first.
Exactly, you eat with your eyes first. So like, that's kind of my form of expression, but herbalism similar. The people that are vending here at the Great Lakes Herb Faire that have these incredible formulas that they've come up with for oxymels and shrubs and switchels and tinctures and teas, and then the labeling that goes into that and everything is just such a invitation to art. And I think there's, like, anything could be really an invitation to art if you bring that lens to it.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm really excited to have on Marc Williams. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you, Mason.
Absolutely.
Good to be back together.
That's right. Together again. It's been a while.
Back together.
I can't remember the last time we hung out, but it's probably some herb conference. I know we've kicked it at the Florida Herbal Conference before, probably Wild Herb Weekend and Great Lakes Herb Faire. Here we are. Marc was one of the keynote speakers. Yeah. Amazing speech you gave, and I actually had a whole bunch of questions for you for the show, but then I saw the keynote and I was like, shoot, I'm gonna have to switch things up a little bit. So excited to ask you some questions kind of based around your keynote. But before we get into that, actually I have another new question to ask you based on just the conversation we were just having. You said resilient means a lot to you, and I'm just kind of curious why that is. The word resilient.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, how that goes is when I was in graduate school, which was like kind of when I was taking classes 2007 to 2009, I got a minor in planning and geography, and I took a planning class that basically one of the textbooks was called Resilience Thinking, and Salt and Walker are the authors, and it kind of changed my life. I mean, it's a real thin text, and obviously can't quite unpack that, but it was real important then. And then kind of not too far after being introduced to that, my professor from when I was at Warren Wilson College, which is where I got my bachelor's degree, I was out in her garden one day talking about how important this book and this concept was to me, and she really took that to heart. And since then, and I mean, this is obviously, quite a long time ago, that's like totally changed the course of her life. And she's one of the most important people in my life. And I actually was just living in her house for the last couple of years. And so there's that connection as well. And in her regard, it was about climate change and being resilient to the climate change in agriculture. And I just have really kind of resonated with it. I guess like kind of the term of art when I was getting my bachelor's was sustainability, right? And I think a lot of people can resonate with the fact that that's been kind of overblown. And so resilience kind of felt like the kind of next frontier. But I'm a little chagrined to say that I feel like now that's kind of overblown. It's like every time you turn on the news or you hear about some natural disaster or whatever, it's all about resilience. But I do think that it is something that is going to be a key concept for us moving forward for all the disturbances that are occurring in our environment in particular.
So you're saying sustainability, resilience, these words are becoming kind of overplayed and just overused? Maybe in a proper context? Or,
maybe, to some degree. I mean, it just kind of gets watered down, I guess, once it just becomes like here, there, and everywhere. And
organic,
organic's another example. Now it's on to regenerative, for instance. And so it's just kind of always pushing this frontier. And once it gets so big, too, then it can mean a lot of different things to different people. Not necessarily reading off the same sheet of music as far as what that concept of resilience or sustainability. I mean, at its extreme, getting greenwashed through some, big mega conglomerate lens or something. And so, but it's not to downplay that it still is very impactful for me. I actually had a friend who does like lace work make a banner that says resilient that's cool. Up in my bedroom that I look at every day, with the sun shining through it in the window. So it's definitely for me going to be a thread, a touchstone conceptually, I think, through the rest of my work here on Earth.
And now you have a shirt collection.
And now I have a shirt collection. We got the Resilient here from the Orlando Grief Project. I will say also that we were talking about before the cameras are rolling about Rising Appalachia, which is one of my all-time favorite bands. And they have a song about resilience that is just such a powerful, call to action, as it were. And so definitely some of the most important people in my life have really resonated with it. And I feel like we've kind of come together as a sort of tribe around that idea.
Absolutely. Rising Appalachia's got to be like the herbal community's flagship band too.
I think Rising Appalachia and Holy River are like probably the two big ones that kind of make the circuit often.
Yep, I think I've seen them at Florida Herbal Conference.
Definitely Florida Herbal Conference. They come through North Carolina and do quite a few things. I feel like maybe they were at the International Herbal Symposium.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Some point too, and
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your love of the word resilient. And I would like to, take it back a little bit. When did Marc first find himself on the plant path? Along with that, I would love if you could kind of weave in the story of meeting Frank Cook and why he's been so influential on you and your work.
Okay.
Because I don't know too much about Frank. I mean, I've heard you speak about him, especially at the keynote, and then I've read about him on your website, etc. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about him too.
All right.
Yeah.
I will do my best to keep it kind of succinct. As you can imagine, it's been an evolution. But I would start it in, to be honest, I would start it kind of even as a teenager with not necessarily understanding where it was going to lead me. But the short and the long of it is stuff like Dungeons and Dragons and like Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and these kind of quote-unquote make-believe characters, and this resonance and kind of a draw I always had to, in particular, the elf type archetype, these kind of nature spirits and everything. And so I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I was always these kind of elf, mage, wizard type nature spirit people. But that was make-believe, and I actually was raised by a military person to be an officer in the military, and so there was kind of that was, pretend, and then this is life, And I actually went away to college with a 4-year ROTC scholarship to be an officer in the Army, but it clearly wasn't working for me. After my freshman year, I left, and so I was basically adrift, and I moved from Orlando, Florida, where I was in that program, to Gainesville, Florida. And in that process met all of these amazing kind of like living elf-type people in human form. And through that, I found out about Vipassana, this 10-day silent meditation retreat type of experience that happens all over the world. And it was my first Vipassana retreat in 1998. I was sitting there about midway through the 10 days, and this like almost bolt of lightning came through me, and that I had always loved cooking, even since I was a child as well. But more like kind of the standard American diet, sad cooking.
Sure.
As it were, lots of salt, sugar, fat, way too much protein, these kinds of things. And I got this like bolt. It was like, well, you need to understand food better, and healthy food in particular, and in particular where that food is coming from. Because I was working in a natural food cafe at that point, so I kind of shifted my diet, and I was vegetarian, but not really healthy at macaroni and spaghetti and ramen noodles and all these things. And so it was like, okay, we need to get deeper with this. And in the process of working at this farm called Phoenix Rising, just north of Gainesville, Florida, in particular, one person named Laura started showing me plants, some of which you can kind of see around now, and telling me the characteristics of them and their stories and how they can help. And something just flipped like a light switch for me that's like, wait, you mean this is real? It's not make-believe? Like you can actually make potions and like... all these things. And so, that kind of set me on this path. And really right around that same time was permaculture and learning about permaculture, and that really changing my life. And shortly after that, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where I still spend most of my time to this day. And I started working on this farm and supplying this restaurant and kind of trying out this idea around agriculture as a potential life course. And once I'd done that for a while, a few years, it was like clear, okay, I think this is my life course. So then I went back to school for all of the kind of more academic training in that regard to Warren Wilson College, just outside of Asheville. And this was really kind of right at the same time as meeting Frank Cook. I mean, I guess I will say that I overlapped with Frank for sure all the way back to 1995 when I went to my first rainbow gathering in Ocala, Florida. That is just south of Gainesville, and welcomehome.org. If you want to know about rainbow, I wrote a whole paper and school about it, so can't unpack that now. But the point is, there were a few hundred people there. Frank was there, I was there, so we definitely interacted. But it's really more fast forward, not so fast, to 2001, and a permaculture gathering happening in Silo, North Carolina, where it just really gelled. Going on walks with Frank there, looking at the plants, and in particular, his conceptual framework around looking at plants in their family groupings, which is a much more simplified way versus looking at them as individuals in isolation. And yeah, he kind of took me under his wing, you know, as like his kind of little brother, mentee, apprentice type person. And in that course, I was continuing to go to the rainbow gatherings, at this point, the big national ones that happen in a different state each year, and going on walks for hours with Frank, and also our shared mutual teacher, Seven Song.
I was going to ask if he was there.
Northeast School of Botanical Medicine. Yeah, so they would co-teach, Seven Song and Frank, and I would be there kind of in the background taking notes, and also, I think fairly quickly, certainly by 2004, working on the botanical survey. We would basically try to make a list of all of the plants that we would find on the land where we were camping over the course of the gathering, which happens about a week before and a week after July 4th every year. And yeah, just kind of continued to build and build. I got my degree from Warren Wilson in 2004, and then started doing landscaping and learning kind of the plants more of the built environment. Because in school I'd learned, you know, the wild plants of the fields and the forest and that kind of thing, but not so much about horticulture and, you know, these kind of things that often are brought from other places. And after I did that, then I went on to graduate school. But pretty much all along, Frank being this thread in there, and in particular taking international journey with him to Costa Rica in the end of 2006 into the beginning of 2007. And that's something Frank did a lot. He basically traveled most of the year. Had kind of two home bases, I guess three home bases, one in Asheville, North Carolina, one in what we call the Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and then one in California in the kind of Nevada City, Grass Valley area in the Sierra foothills. And so he would be there for more extended periods, which for him would be like maybe a few weeks to like a month or something, but then largely for months at a time, traveling internationally and eventually leading tours like the one I went on in Costa Rica. And unfortunately, he passed away though in 2009. And in that passing, there was this big movement to keep the ball rolling on his work and his legacy. And that led to the establishing of a nonprofit called Plants and Healers International. And I was fairly quickly rolled into the board of Plants and Healers International, and then eventually elevated to the director of Plants and Healers International, and started kind of taking on that role of leading these international tours and doing a lot of study, especially in Latin America and Central South America in particular. And yeah, that's just kind of continued, you know, to this day as far as traveling, educating, although I've really kind of reeled myself in, especially since the pandemic, like a lot of people, and even Plants and Healers International in the pandemic was basically something that went from an active organization to something that's more archival and not an actual going concern, although the website plantsandhealers.org continues, and that's the Instagram that I have any access to as Plants and Healers as well. But yeah, that's kind of some of the path there, both for myself and with Frank.
Wow, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Is that baby coming up?
It's fine.
Are you sure? Just keep it rolling. All right, thanks.
Hey, we like babies.
Yeah,
Bring on the babies. That's what we're doing it for, right? I mean, that's the last line of my bio, actually, on my website.
We're doing it for the babies?
Yeah, his greatest hope is that this work will help fix our current challenging global situation for the future.
I love that. Yeah, that's all right. Well, shout out to the babies out there. Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Am I correct in Frank Cook and I guess you were, was it Thomas Elpel's book, Botany in a Day?
Yeah.
Is that kind of the mission, what you were basing a lot of the teaching around that book?
Right. So that is certainly a fundamental thing, once again, that continues to this day for me.
So
but
cool.
Yeah, so Frank kind of discovered that at some point. I mean, he was already pretty into it when I was really getting into it with him in 2001, and then led online class by email. So we're really taking it back before you really had, forums like on websites, let alone Zoom wasn't even a sparkle in the eye of creation. And so when he passed away after doing it for 9 years, one thing that was very clear to me, even before the nonprofit was established, was that course needed to continue. Because one of the best things about the course is that it's by donation, right? And Frank actually lived his whole life by donation.
I heard you say that was wild.
Yeah, just humbled to even think about trying to pull that off. Especially the last time we taught together, there was a fairly big group of people, and some of them were even our friends, and the chump change that he was given for a whole day where we did 3 different places with walks and a lunch that was like super gourmet as well. It was like, I don't know if that's going to work, but certainly the botany class in particular, I was like, this has got to continue because as many people that are interested in botany need to know it. And so I then established the website botnyeveryday.com and started hosting that class there in 2010. And so here we are 15 years later, which is just so hard to believe, that I've done it like 150% of the time that my great teacher Frank did it, at 9 years. To eclipse that quite a bit is wild how time works that way.
It is wild. Time flies. So yeah, check out botnyeveryday.com. Also highly recommend the book by Thomas Elpel.
Yeah, Botany in a Day. And just to be clear, that gets confusing sometimes. So the book is Botany in a Day. And Frank and I, we had this joke that it needs to be Botany every day.
I love
Botany
that.
in a Day, you know? And so when I was trying to come up with a website title, that was just like, okay, especially because it was about the class with the book. And I just can't say enough good stuff about Thomas, the author, too. He has been so generous with me.
Really?
I remember when I first reached out and I was like, I want to continue this tradition of Frank. He's like, good, that's awesome. Because he's definitely good at botany. He does a lot of other things, though, too. And he is, Thomas in this case, has published so many books about the natural building and traveling by canoe down the Missouri River, all this stuff. So botany is not, like necessarily his whole thing. So I think he was real happy, to see somebody running with it. And he basically sent me everything that he had published just for free. And then I started getting cases of the books for him at a very wholesale rate. And it's just been incredible. And then I actually helped participate in the revising of that book when it first went from black and white to color. I don't know, now that was maybe 11, 12, I don't know. That was quite a while ago now, but time, exactly. So yeah, that is a core tenet, I would say, of Frank's legacy, now my legacy, and definitely a place where not just that class, but lots of other resources are freely available for anybody that's interested, as well as the plantsandhealers.org site.
Super cool. So you said something during your keynote that I really wanted to ask you about, and I think this was a Frank Cook quote, something about eat something wild every day.
Yeah.
And I found that personally inspirational.
Yeah. Because
sometimes, we're just going along with our life, we're doing our to-do list, and, we find ourselves away sometimes from the wild, and I'm like, this is such a simple thing that we could try to do year-round.
Yeah.
And, I'm living in Wisconsin now, and I'm thinking of, like, the dead of winter, and I'm like, I bet I could still find something
pine needles.
wild. Yeah, pine needles, exactly.
Nothing else, and you got pine needles always, but...
could you tell us why the importance of that, and maybe even some of the phytochemistry in our body, why that could be potentially beneficial health-wise, or is there, like, a spiritual aspect in your mind, or what would you say about that?
Gosh, I would say a lot. And in particular, I'd say I would hope I could do it justice because like it was Frank's kind of conceptual framework. But I will say the one t-shirt we printed for the nonprofit, that was the quote, was eat something wild every day with a picture of the green man. And I would say that, you know, at a kind of fundamental level, it's about sense of place. It's about being grounded where you are. It's about connecting directly versus just kind of going in this passive way.
Sure.
And yeah, that alone is important, and how you kind of view the world. I mean, another concept that kind of ties into that from Frank is this idea of the green wall, which I certainly grew up with, and I think a lot of other people, especially that grow up in urban places, it's like it's plants, you know, this monolithic wall of green. And so once you kind of have this angle on it, you know, about what is potentially edible, that's like one of the most powerful things that just starts to pull them out as more individual, different entities and species than just like this conglomerate of one thing. But certainly lots of nutrients, right? And I mean, that standard American diet, or really you could extend it out to the world, there's about 30 plants that provide the vast majority of all of the nutrients for the whole entire world out of over 400,000 that are known. And say like over 3,000 that are edibles just in North America alone, right? So it's kind of like this double order of magnitude, you know, 30 times 10 times 10 is what's available. And now it's been distilled down. And actually, there's a handful of plants that come close to the majority, you know, corn, wheat, soy, and rice. And yeah, it doesn't really take a genius to understand that if you're like narrowing down your diversity to such a small group, that if anything went wrong, and especially with that handful, then things could really go off the rails really quick. But beyond that, it's about kind of what I call like a re-indigenizing, like a neo-indigeneity, right? Like any indigenous group around the world, depending on where they are going to have at least 100, 200 plants that are going to be in their repertoire, from food to medicine. And there are all of these micronutrients and all of these other compounds that aren't going to be found, especially in kind of commercial produced and like kind of bred to be real big and not necessarily real nutritious type of plants that then are shipped for thousands of miles, often losing nutrients as they go too. So it definitely has a pragmatic aspect to it as well. If it doesn't get fresher, then picking it yourself from right where you are and consuming it right away.
I'm also thinking, like, isn't it true that, say, broccoli, cauliflower, collard greens, kale, Brussels sprouts, they're all
the same species.
Broccoli, shit, I already forgot the genus and species.
Brassica.
Brassica, Oleracea. Or, So I'm like, you're probably, when you're consuming all those different veggies, you're still getting a very similar amount of phytonutrients that way.
And there are a lot of wild things that are in that same family as all of those, in that mustard family, it's typically called. And that, right, before we could go to a grocery store somewhere to get like our vitamins and minerals in pill form in some bottle, that is like one of the biggest, most nutritious groups of plants in the whole entire world for vitamin A and vitamin C and calcium and iron and magnesium and all these things that obviously we need to flourish. So that would be one of the, say, top 5 of the 400 plus flowering plant families by far for food in particular of the cold places of the world specifically.
For sure. Awesome. So going back to the keynote, just some things that I wanted to bring up that, you know, really sounded interesting to me. So we'll throw you a softball. First of all, we were talking about this before we were recording. Your pepperidum. I just want to hear about it. It sounds super fun. Instead of the arboretum, the pepperidum.
Exactly. And I think it was my own invention. I mean, most people, or certainly people into plants, know that an arboretum is a collection of trees. And so for quite a while, I mean, over a decade, I've been growing a selection of peppers each year, largely to make hot sauce and things like fire cider. And it struck me one day, it was like, well, it's like a pepperidum, because it's kind of like a collection of peppers, just like an arboretum is a collection of trees. And I will say the newest addition to that conceptual framework is a curcumaridum, which is a collection of turmerics. So I have like...
You mean there's not just one?
Oh, there's multiple species even. There's blue turmerics and green turmerics and quite a number of species besides curcuma longa. So I kind of took off the genus name, in this case, a curcumeritum from curcuma is the scientific name for turmerics. But in particular, shout out to Andy Firk, who is an incredible plant person and naturalist in South Florida, who just has an insane collection of lots of plants, but is kind of a specialist in things like turmeric and ginger. So yeah, I'm a big collector of a lot of things, but definitely a big admirer also of diversity within each individual thing.
Yeah. Do you ever make fermented hot sauce?
Yeah, I have some.
That's some good stuff.
Yeah, it is. And I want to do it more.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't do it more, because I ferment a lot.
Sure.
But typically what I do, and this is actually in combination with a friend who's kind of like my bonus little sister, not by blood, but by love. And every year, and I guess like before that with her mom, I would make hot sauce every year, and it would be kind of like a more vinegar based kind of thing that's more like a quick thing that we would just do all in an afternoon or something.
And you're homies with Sandor cats too, right?
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, Sandor was really close with Frank as well. And
Really?
Yeah, oh,
I love
definitely.
that.
Oh, huge.
so
Yeah,
cool.
they would co-teach together quite a bit.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and
I love Sandor's work.
Exactly. Wild
Yeah.
fermentation is, you know, kind of like the tome.
Classic.
The classic for the space, and I'd call him the dean of fermentation for our country, not one of the deans for the
awesome.
world.
Yeah.
And so I've been very fortunate to interact with Sandor for over 20 years now.
Well, when you see Sandor next, tell him Mason says hi. I've never met him, but
Okay.
we make a drink called Smreka,
Yeah.
which is a Bosnian drink.
I remember
juniper.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's from his book, The
Yeah.
Art of Fermentation, the other tome. he made,
Which
so-
I'm actually in the art of fermentation.
Are you really?
In the
That's
section
cool.
about brewing honey wine, also known
cool.
as mead.
Yeah, you're big into that.
Yeah. And there's a whole section about this practice, also inspired by Frank, of doing mead circles, where basically a bunch of brewers come together, you know, initially with Frank, maybe a handful of other people, but then ultimately growing up to 50, 60, 70 people, and we'd have 50, 60, 70 meads over the course of one sitting. And so in Sandor's Art of Fermentation book, there's like a set list of the mead circles he did, I think in 2006, 2007.
Wow.
That I like used to like basically record every single mead that people offered up in those circles for quite a few years, although now it's been quite a few years since I've been doing that too.
You've got a lot of fun traditions. You got the pepperita.
Tradition!
Yeah. It's fun to create and make stuff up and
It
you know,
is.
just have fun with it all.
And I mean, it kind of speaks to how I feel like we're all hardwired for ritual too,
Absolutely,
right? That
yeah.
that's just like so deep and primal in the lineage of all humans. And it also just is such a way to celebrate the seasons, celebrate certain special places, certain special people, especially people that have passed.
Right.
You know, I have Frank Cook Memorial Meads now that on his birthday or on his passing day, you know, that we'll break that open and think about him and maybe pour out a little liquor for the
That's
homie.
right. Yeah, that's right.
You know,
Rest
and then
in
make
peace.
something new.
Very good. Awesome. Well, transitioning a little bit to maybe something a little more esoteric, but you said something about we are all artists.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to do with herbalism per se, but maybe it does. But
I think
just
it
curious,
does.
Just curious what you have to say about that.
And I think it's embedded within your question, what I think
Sure.
is a bit of a challenge in our society. And I will say this is something I got from dating an artist like well over 20 years ago now who had that as a bumper sticker. Or no, it was everyone is an artist was the actual bumper sticker on her car. And, you know, I, like a lot of people, have grown up with this idea of like, oh, you can't draw, oh, you can't sing, so you need to do something else, you know. Don't quit your day job. That's not for you.
Right.
And this is something else just like ritual that is just so hardwired and so primal in our lineage that everyone is an artist. And to cut ourselves off from making music just because we can't be professional at it, or to not draw, which I can remember my plant taxonomy class at Warren Wilson where we had to draw, like that was our lab, was that we'd have just a ton of plants to draw, and I just never thought of myself as a drawer. And certainly, you know, we had like professional class people in there, and you would see their lab journals and it'd be like, oh man, you could publish this as a book.
Yeah.
And you see my thing and it looks like some scrawl from some child, you know. But at the same time, that level of intense focus and awareness really brought to light these aspects of the plants that I never would have noticed if I was just like kind of looking at them and passing in some book or some picture online. But beyond just like the kind of practical elements of, say, learning botany, there's just something soul-wise, right, that gets fed from the creative force. And so obviously, like a lot of people think of art in some way, maybe even just fine art, you know, painting or something like that, or a sculpture or something like that. And then even things like, say, basketry or pottery or whatever, that's craft, you know, and then there's like whatever else everybody else does, you know, and there's just something, even if it's not necessarily some beautiful thing to put in a museum, to just eat out of a bowl that you made, or a spoon that you carved, or a basket that you formed, that it just feeds you in this way that almost nothing else can. And certainly for me, I think of myself as a culinary artist, and with my chefing, it's all about, as much about beauty, and beauty being its own form of food and medicine, nourishment, just as much as
you
the actual.
Eat with your eyes first.
Exactly, eat with your eyes first. So like, that's kind of my form of expression, but herbalism similar. The people that are vending here at the Great Lakes Herb Faire that have these incredible formulas that they've come up with for oxymels and shrubs and switchels and tinctures and teas, and then the labeling that goes into that and everything is just such a invitation to art. And I think there's, like, anything could be really an invitation to art if you bring that lens to it.
I love that way of looking at it. And when we were just hanging out with Rosemary recently, she was talking about singing to the plants, and she's like, the plants don't care what your voice sounds like, but it's just the act of singing. And I remember I interviewed a rapper from Seattle named Torrin Frost, and he's like, anyone can rap. Like, it's not a matter about being good, it's a matter about just enjoying the process and the creation of it. And I feel like a lot of what you just said that spoke to that. It's the process, that's what enriches your soul. It's not about being good or professional or making money from it or this or that. So I'm glad that I asked you, because right when you said it during your keynote, I was like, oh, I want to touch base with Mark on that. I thought that was super neat. But anything else you want to say, or just kind of?
Yeah, I think that's
kind of sums it up nicely.
Cool.
Yeah, well...
go art.
Go art, exactly.
Go plants.
I'm married to an artist. Amanda's an amazing artist. And
go Mason, go Amanda. Go team.
That's right.
Teamwork making the dream work.
That's right.
All of those things.
Go world. And another thing you said during the keynote was the world, the earth doesn't need saving. Maybe it's the human species that needs the saving, or something to that effect.
And I think that it could be a little bit misconstrued that way, because obviously there are a lot of things that are threatened and imperiled that need saving. But what I'm saying is, when people are like, we have to save the earth, like as a whole entity and structure, the earth will definitely go on. And also, I said, definitely for sure, microbes of some sort will go on, insects of some sort will go on, plants of some sort will go on, fungi, you know, the people. And a lot of the other animals, actually, we're probably the most threatened kingdom and group, really. And certainly people are doing most of the threatening, both for ourselves and all of these other creatures. But really how I've summed it down, this goes back to graduate school, is that we need to save our place on the earth in this, because we're kind of like narrow in our band of acceptable environment to be able to thrive. Versus like thinking that the earth itself is going to go away. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it is kind of chilly out. Well, you're just in your, I thought you were wearing a t-shirt.
I do. It is a kind of a t-shirt. It's a little long sleeve, but it's all right.
Post dinner, we're wrapping up here. Yeah, I mean, maybe just kind of end on something else. We'll see if there's anything else from my notes that I definitely want to touch on. We'll have to do a round 2 at some point.
Let's do it.
Because you have so much to share, Mark, and it was awesome to hear your keynote, and then Rosalie had it on. Did you get to see Rosalie's
I did,
too?
Very much. Laugh out loud, funny. I mean, hilarious, that woman.
Talk about the phytonutrients too. I liked her pancakes. Like, try to get as many phytonutrients in the morning.
Right.
That was super cool. Thought that was kind of
totally non-geeky.
Totally non-geeky, exactly. Well, you had some words of wisdom too. And that was really fun. What was the other thing? Sorry.
The shallow wells, or?
Thank you. That's what it was. So, I really love that concept, because I grew up in an atheist home. I've always fancied myself as very spiritual. And so it was odd to be raised in an atheist home when you have such a a yearning for spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up dipping my toes in lots of different religions. I still kind of do that to some effect or not, but yeah, I really myself, I want to deepen my spiritual practice, and I do that in my own ways. But trying to choose like one religion, I'm like, well, is that the way? But it was kind of put to me similarly to how you said it, is like, if I could just keep going super shallow with one particular spiritual practice, how deep am I actually going? And I think you could actually apply what you were saying to a lot of different facets of life.
Very much
not
so.
just religion or
with your
spirituality.
friends.
With your friends, exactly.
You know, for instance, with your work.
Right.
You know, I mean, yeah.
Do you think of that in a spiritual sense? But yeah, and even more so, can you like clarify or further explain what you were referring to when you said that?
Yeah, so the conceptual framework came from, once again, my 1998 Vipassana meditation sit. And after that, right, because we're so quiet, like the whole time, but then at the end we can talk. And there was this guy who was like an older student, done it before, just looked like the classic Zen monk, you know, just like stock still. I mean, we're meditating 10, 12 hours a day, if not more. Wow. Right, for 10 days.
Wow.
And so I'm talking with him finally because I'm just so intrigued. And I had this whole thing in mind too of like who he was, you know, and he was very different. He was very lighthearted. He seemed so serious, you know. But I was talking and he's kind of, so who are you and what are you doing? And I will say Vipassana, they tend to kind of be like, this is kind of the way, you know, and it's not a way that's, maybe not the way, but it's not a way to necessarily be mixed with other ways. Yeah. So that's just like at a framework. And we were talking about, and I was like, well, yeah, Vipassana is good, but, you know, transcendental meditation's good. You know, other forms of meditation are great. And then there's all the different schools of yoga and, you know, there's indigenous wisdom and spirituality that's inspiring, and Celtic traditions, as well. And so I was kind of in this sample phase, similar to you. I joke my dad's religion was golf. Every Sunday he was on the golf course. And often, even as a child on Sunday, I would be in somebody's church, you know, like kind of whether it's the Baptist church or the Methodist church or the Lutheran church, or just kind of seeking, because innately there was this kind of need. And so when I expressed that to this Zen monk Buddhist dude, he was kind of like, well, be cautious of digging too many shallow wells because you might not get to water.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's not to say that experimentation and kind of like feeling around in the field is something that's natural, especially when you're young, to explore. But at a certain point, not necessarily just choosing one, because that's certainly something I could restrict myself to either, but at least like kind of narrowing it down. And I mean, a classic thing that this ties into that, like you said, resonates so many walks of our life is quality over quantity. Right. And so whether it's in our friendships or whatever other things that we might be exploring, there's only so much bandwidth to go around, and there's only so much time and energy to put into something. And so I definitely, as I've aged, have resonated more and more and more with this idea of narrowing my focus to get deeper versus like going more broad.
I love that. I think the audience is going to love that. Thank you so much, Mark. Is there anything else you want to impart to the audience before we wrap up and get out of here?
Well, I definitely think that everybody needs to know the plants around them. Everybody needs to get with it as far as their diet and lifestyle choices to maintain health and well-being, especially as time goes on. And certainly we owe it to the future more than anything, to the babies more than anything, to be the best people we can be in the now for the future that is going to be there for them.
Amen. You've always inspired me, Mark. Thank you for joining me on the show. That's botnyeveryday.com. And find Mark on the socials. We'll leave links in the podcast show notes, YouTube description, etc. And thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you,
That was a lot of
Mason.
fun. Second high five of the interview. And we're going to wrap it up, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Till next time.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, HerbRally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.